just to give you a little bit of a background on TraumaSim, who we are, what we do and why we do it, we started back in 2008. So we have been around a while now. My background was that I was a critical care nurse for 16 years, and from that I moved into training. And initially I was teaching first aid courses, medic courses, and wanted really to find a way to make it a little bit more interesting and a little bit more hands-on. I felt that there wasn't at that time, and we're going back sort of nearly 15 years now, there wasn't a lot of simulation that was happening. So everyone was used to having a CPR Annie, and they weren't really used to much other simulation. And so I wanted to make it a little bit more realistic. So initially I went to the US and did some training over there, came back, started TraumaSim. And it kicked off pretty quickly. Initially we were just providing realistic, medically accurate wounds for training exercises. That was pretty much our bag. So moulage is the other word for that. And we started up, got found by the Army, and that sort of took us off on a pretty rapid ascent. We were providing that sort of support all across the country for pre-deployment training for Afghanistan and Iraq. That also took us into a position of seeing how they were training, which was really sort of quite fascinating. The Army, if nothing else, they do lots and lots and lots of training. Basically, if they're not deploying somewhere, they're training. That's their job. So it was great to see that sort of effort being put in, and they loved what we were doing, and so our opportunities grew with that. So after working with the Army and doing all of that, that opened up other opportunities for us, and things took off to the point that now we sell our products globally. We do training globally, and we purchased a business in the USA back in late 2019. And if you think about what was happening late 2019, it was just before COVID kicked off. So not a great time to buy a business in the US, but you know, you do these things and you get by. So we have a pretty big global spread. We have distributors in the UK, in Italy, in UAE, Middle East, and the USA. So we're getting stuff out there, I guess. The types of customers that we have are a variety from military, universities, police, fire, hospitals, and increasingly first aid training. And as you know, the changes with the first aid training units of competency has sort of meant a bit of a astronomical rise for some of the types of products that we produce. A little bit about the history of the type of items that we have here. So this is our hemorrhage control training range. We do a lot of other simulation products as well, but we bunch these things together for today's purposes. So on the end here are our Emergency Tourniquet Trainers, and they're the training aid that we started with. And that came about because on Army training exercises back in 2008, 2009, we were seeing that they were needing to learn to use a tourniquet. They could do some great lessons with it. They'd put them on each other and practice and learn all the theory really well. And then they went outside and they had big long trestle tables set up with legs of lamb, bits and pieces like that, that they would put a tourniquet on. And obviously, you know, it feels meaty and all that, and you get that concept of it, but it doesn't bleed and you really don't get a whole lot of feedback from it. The other downside to that was at the time we were doing that up in Queensland, and so, you know, meat outside for the whole day. End of the day, they'd pack it away in a fridge, they'd get it out again the next day, and we'd kick off again, and that was pretty disgusting. And so I remember my business partner and I at the time said, if we could come up with a synthetic product that could do the same thing, would you be interested? And they were sceptical, but went, yeah, sure, if you can pull that off, yeah, no worries. So we went off and did a heap of research, a heap of trial and error. At that stage, there were no training aids for tourniquet application worldwide, and we came up with our first version of this, and we got it out there, and they really liked it. We had a little bit of a learning curve over the first 18 months or so, improving things, getting all the plumbing right, getting the feel of it right and the look of it right, and then it became pretty much universally used across all of Army tourniquet training. That grew on to the Israeli Defence Force, found out about it from one of our soldiers overseas, and then they wanted to buy them from us as well. So we started making them in large numbers for the Israeli Defence Force. And then as time has gone on and the changes to the acceptance of tourniquets within Australian civilian first aid grew, then it was we were providing them to police and paramedic training and the whole gamut. So that was our first cab off the rank, and then we moved more into the Hemostatic Clotting Trainers to again go away from the fact that they were using legs of lamb, pieces of pork, whatever they could get from the butchers, and they were buying litres of blood, like real animal blood from the abattoir. So we came up with synthetic answers to all of those issues, which is a lot safer and a lot more pleasant for all concerned. And then that range just grew. As different customers asked for different things, we would make different things. Because we make all of our products here in Australia and we're a small business, we have that ability to be flexible and make things, changes to things, and we do all our own moulds and so forth. So it was easy to let that grow, I guess. The other question is, why do people need training aids? Why not just have a lesson and then get on with it? It really comes down to, I guess, that applying a tourniquet in a real life situation is probably one of the hardest things that you're likely to need to do. We all learn about, how quickly you die when your heart stops and how quickly you need CPR, but it's sort of been a little bit brushed over, I guess, how quickly people bleed to death, and that if we can get that tourniquet on in the first couple of minutes, that's absolutely life-saving. And the fact that a paramedic is unlikely to be there in those first few minutes means that really the more and more average Joe that are taught to use it, the better. And of course, it's a very hard thing to do in the heat of the moment when there's blood everywhere and a very stressed casualty and all of that. So the idea of the training aid is to give you that real feedback, that feeling that you have when you put it on. It teaches you how tight it has to be. And of course, it's different on every human that you put it on, but this is roughly around about the same as it would be to put it on a leg or an arm. So it gives people that feeling of achieving that. Keeping in mind that your real live casualty is going to be kicking and screaming and fighting you off. So if you have it in your memory somewhere how tight you went and what that felt like and that was the right thing to do and that you saw the blood stopped, you're more likely to be able to deal with it when the actual time comes. Same thing with packing wounds with hemostatic agents or any dry dressing even, that it's an unnatural act to stick your fingers into someone's open wound while they're screaming and kicking and fighting you and all of that. So that was the purpose of all of this, is to get people actually comfortable to do that and give them something in the back of their mind and in their memory that's how you do it. It's known that realistic simulation helps with the retention of skills and knowledge, so they're more likely to be able to draw that out of their head later, builds their confidence, and there's also research around the reduction of post-traumatic stress if people are trained as realistic as possible at the beginning. And I think just as we can't imagine teaching CPR without a resuscitation mannequin, there'll come a time that you won't think twice about the fact that for hemorrhage control you also need a simulation piece. What I'll do now is take you through the range of the different products and the differences in them. All of our products are made with a medical grade silicone. So we don't do anything in latex. Latex has a reasonably high rate of allergies amongst people, so we don't like to do any of our moulage or any of our part-task trainers in latex. Just that risk that you just don't know who's going to turn up and have an allergy to it. Any of the pieces can be made in any number of colours. I've got a little sample piece here that you're welcome to flick through, but that's basically all the different pigments that we can put into it. So when we make them, there's different colours that we can put into the silicone so that they can come out in a range of looks. So, you know, we can cover pretty much anything there. And as I said, they're all made here in Perth, so there's not a lot of time to wait for products if you need them. We're trying to have as much on the shelf as we can at the moment. The orders are really picking up, but we're trying to keep ahead of all of that. So starting with the most basic Hemostatic Clotting Trainers are these ones here. So these are our basic squares. And we make them as either a laceration or as a gunshot wound. The gunshot wound has a big cavity underneath. So the idea of that is that it's simulating the cavitation that happens behind a gunshot wound, which is where all that hemorrhage is going to be happening, and that you want to be able to get in there and not just sort of treat it on the surface. So the idea of this is that they can actually get into the source of the bleed and pack that internally. And the laceration is a big open, wide laceration. These are all made with a silicone tube that goes directly into the base of it so that there's a source of bleeding for them. So if we're setting up to use it, what we would normally do is have something underneath to collect the mess, because it is a little bit of a messy situation that we're going to create. We've just used lids off you know, your plastic packing containers, but you can put down, you know, cheap plastic drop sheets or like the incontinence blue sheets, that sort of thing, towels, anything like that. Or you can do it inside a plastic bucket. I see plenty of people that use, you know, the square plastic containers and just put the whole lot inside there. So we've got that. We've got our syringes that come with it. We've got some gauze. And what we have here is just a compressed gauze for training. So as you probably know, the actual hemostatic agent itself is very expensive. So for training, that's really, you know, not something that people want to do, whereas the cheap gauze is an alternative. So you might want to show them what the real stuff looks like, and then say, but you know, for today we're going to use the training aid. Some scissors to cut that off, just so you're not wasting too much. Gloves if you need it, and then we want some blood, the key component to what we're doing. So we use a stage blood. It's a Ben Nye product, comes out of the USA. It's made to professional standards for like Hollywood actor sort of stuff. It's not particularly expensive for what it is. The reason we use this one is that it's very safe and it washes out of everything. So if you get it on your tablecloths, on your clothes, or everywhere else, I've had it on carpets and cleaned it out, and it's not too much of a drama in that way. It's safe to go on your skin, and it's safe to go in your mouth. Now, not that you're going to be doing that with these types of training, but we also use this in our moulage where we might do facial injuries and so forth. So it's very safe to use. Because we're going to run it through some tubing, we need to dilute it a little bit. So we would normally dilute this down 1 part blood to 4 or 5 parts water. So what I'm going to do here is just pour some into our jug. And that's a bit of a rough measurement, but you get the general idea. The other thing about using a professional grade product as your blood rather than cooking something up on the stove is that you have a safety data sheet for it. So if you're doing it for clients in industry, you will often have to provide safety data sheets for everything that you do. Anywhere where, you know, anything's coming into contact with people, you have to be able to prove that it's safe and been tested and so forth. So this is just a 60ml syringe, just a nice easy way to get it into your thing. We've put this one on an angle just so it's easy for you to see, but we'd normally just sit it flat on the table. And then it has like one arterial spot at the top here where it's going to flow out, and we would normally, get it started and get it flowing so that the student can see where the blood's coming from. You teach them the lesson. So the other thing I need to make clear is today I'm not teaching you how to teach hemorrhage control, because I know different RTOs are doing that slightly differently, and we're not an RTO, so that's not our bag, all right? But we know all about the training aids. So once it's flowing, you can sort of do your lesson of how you would treat that, what you would do, how you would find that source of the bleeding. But basically they can look in there, they can feel in there, all of that, and they can see where that point is, and then they can start packing that. So you can, it's a bit awkward at this angle, but you can, I'll just speed this up so you're not watching grass grow. The nice thing about the silicone is that it's very stretchy. You can squeeze quite a lot in there. You can keep going and it'll sort of take that up. So you can keep doing your whole lesson like that, get the pressure on and do all of that. And if you want to release it, take the pressure off and show them that if they don't keep the pressure on, it keeps bleeding, you can keep it bleeding through there. So you can get all those messages across that, the goal is to get it packed, fill the cavity, keep the pressure on, and what happens when you don't. So that's the most basic one that we do is that one. The gunshot wound is the same process, except you're going into a cavitation instead of just a small block. And then stepping right along to these ones here, again, a laceration and a gunshot wound. These are just a little bit more human shape to them compared to the flat ones. Some people prefer it that way, some people don't care. It's really personal choice. With these ones, we just provide them with a little squeeze bottle instead of the syringe. That's really the only difference there. And then you can do exactly the same thing with them. So you can make him bleed. You can get in there, stretch the wound open, have a good look, take anything out that you need to take out, any of that sort of stuff, and then jam your fingers in there. They're really robust. So these have been made with a reinforced layer underneath, so they'll take a lot of stretch. So when we look at the gunshot wound, for example, it looks like a small hole and then a big bit underneath, but that will actually stretch wide open. So if you've got, big male thumbs going there and so forth, it's not going to tear. They're sort of designed to be able to deal with that. So that's those two. Moving along, the thigh. This was the first Hemostatic Clotting Trainer that we made, and this was for the army because they were at that stage using hindquarters of pork and all sorts of stuff, and they wanted something big, and they wanted to be simulating a junctional wound. So by junctional wound, we're talking about where a limb meets the body, so either an armpit wound or a groin wound. Those big, life-threatening, nasty things. So that's what he was just sort of designed as a thigh. So he's got his femoral artery severed here, and he bleeds exactly the same as these guys do. So I won't keep running them all, but yeah, he's pretty much the same. Yeah, all this range of colours and all of that sort of thing. In case you're wondering, the redness on these is made with silicone as well, so that won't come off. The silicone skin part is all poured, and then the colour is painted on separately. Because it's silicone to silicone, it stays. Okay, so moving back down around this way, we've gone through the Hemostatic Clotting Trainers on their own, and these two guys down the end here are our Tourniquet Trainers. So as I said before, these were the first training aids that we made, and in the first couple of years there were a few changes to them, but pretty much in the last 5 years there's been no real changes. We've been very happy with how it's been performing, and there are literally well over 1,000 of them out there, and they've been across all of Army, Israeli Defence Force, pretty much every ambulance service in Australia has some of these, except WA. The police, we have large numbers of these go out to police training. So that sort of started back, is it 2018, I think, when the Commonwealth Games were on? Queensland Police at that stage bought large numbers. They were training every police officer to use a tourniquet, and we sold them these and another hemorrhage control trainer that I'll show you shortly. They put together their own tactical first aid course that every officer went through, and in the fallout from that, in the 18 months from them doing that training, they documented that 30 lives had been saved out on the street, just for the simple fact that the police happened to be first on the scene. So it was either motor vehicle accidents, domestic violence, that sort of thing. Just sometimes just by sheer luck, they're there before the ambos and they're able to get in and do that. That's been sort of happening around most states, including here, and so it's made a lot of differences. Their course, by the way, went on to win a Global Police Award after that, so they were sort of pretty happy with that. So the idea is, with these, there's a leg option and an arm option, just exactly the same but smaller. The idea is that it's meant to look like an amputation, and it bolts onto a table so you can set it up anywhere. A lot of people train with them outdoors, but you can set up, as we have, to do it indoors as well. And they're very, very robust. So the one thing we learn about from working with soldiers is that they are pretty rough on things, and they're taught to put their heart and soul into trying to stop that bleed. So they will get on there and swing off it and put it there, everything on it. So they are very tough. They have a solid plastic core to them, and then there's some layers underneath where the tubing is that enable us to get it to the right feeling for how much you've got to turn off turn the tourniquet. So the idea is that it has a pump, which I'll just bring up here for the moment, which is just a standard pump that comes with it. But the reason that it's just a hand pump rather than an electronic pump is so that you can use it in the field anywhere. They're cheap to replace if you break them, and you're not going to run out of power, batteries or anything like that. It's very, very simple. All we do is put water in it and a little bottle of food colouring. You can sort of take your pick as to how much you put in, but generally we'd put about 1 bottle per 5 litres. That just screws on the top. And then all the tubing that comes with it has these little connectors in there. And the way that this works is that the little red piece, you pull that back, and that way you can pull the tubing out. When you push the tubing back in, again, you squeeze the red connector back and you push that firmly in. And you'll feel it sort of grab. And then once that's happened, you let go and it holds them firmly. And that will give you a watertight seal. There's a tap at the top here, just a quarter turn tap. And there's another quarter turn tap at the back of the unit. So all you need to do with these is just pump until you'll feel when it gets firm, which it is about now. And then I'm going to give it a squirt and you'll see what happens. Belinda's there to catch. So that's the idea, is that it's squirting out under pressure. I'm going to just turn it off so you don't have to listen to the noise of that. But the idea is in training that you can get that feeling of stress up to them, that this is bleeding, there's lots of mess, you've got to work quickly. So the idea is that once they get their tourniquet on, it will actually stop the bleeding. And sometimes, they'll do a pretty good job, it'll slow it down, but it's not quite there. They might need to increase the pressure a little bit more, and they can see that. So they get that instant feedback of what it's actually doing, so they know how tight they've got to go. Because people think, oh, that, you know, if they do it on themselves that tight, it really, really hurts. So they think, oh, I can't go that tight. And this is giving them that mental picture that, yeah, you can, you have to. They're still bleeding, you have to do it. So that's the idea with those guys. They can do a stump dressing on here if you want to get into doing that. You can talk about, you know, what else you might do with that. So yeah, that's pretty much how these guys work. With this pump, when you finish and you want to clean up, what you do is that just releases your pressure so that it's not going to squirt out when you disconnect things. And then we would generally just run some water through it at the end and dry it out before you pack it away. So very easy to use. They are very robust and will last a long time. They come as either a single unit with a pump, or as this one's set up, this has a bifurcation in the tubing so that you're running 2 limbs off the one pump, or you can have 4 limbs off one pump. So a lot of the army setups we would have 12 of them. So we'd have 3 pumps and a U shape of tables, and they're all pointing out, and then the trainers are in the middle, and then the guys are all coming in to work on it from the outside. Little things that I've seen them do over the years in terms of that teaching to get them more and more confident, give them a few times to practice it, get them sort of feeling like, oh yeah, I know how to do that, and then increase the pressure to them a little bit more, like getting their anxiety levels up a little bit, getting their fine motor skills to go. So they would get them to do, you know, star jumps or push-ups or run to the fence and back, so that their heart rate's up a little bit and they've got a little bit of the jitters going on, and see how much harder it is, those fine motor skills of doing up that tourniquet when you're under a little bit more pressure. So there's stuff like that you can do. Timing them. How long did it take them to get that tourniquet on? How much blood would they have lost in that time? That sort of stuff. So we've done the Hemostatic Clotting Trainers, the simple ones. We've done the Tourniquet Trainers. And then we've got a couple of other big guns down this end of the table. And these ones are made to be more combination sort of systems, really. The arm here is designed to attach onto a pump just the same way that the Tourniquet Trainer does. The big laceration across the forearm is going through the radial artery, and that bleeds under pressure, so that really squirts out again. So they can apply a tourniquet anywhere in here, and you can be the judge of where is best, because I know different people are teaching different things around that. But it will work, the tourniquet will work within that range there. And then up the top here in the armpit, so in the junctional area, I guess, where you can't effectively get a tourniquet on, there's a wound up in here that they can pack. So this is our latest product, I guess, to try to fill that gap of having one training aid that does both things. And some people are keen for that. Some people like the old standard. So, you know, it's whatever floats your boat, I guess. This guy here, here's our biggest and scariest of the hemorrhage control range. He was designed specifically for the Israeli Defence Force. They asked us to put together something that would meet the needs of doing a limb tourniquet, but also a big junctional groin wound. They were using a product called a junctional tourniquet, which is what this big bad boy here is, and they wanted to be able to practice with both of those. So the idea with him is he has the 3 tubes coming in from the back that go on exactly the same pump. He bleeds out through the amputation, and that range of his leg there works as a tourniquet trainer, so keeps bleeding until they get that really tight. But he also has these 2 wounds here. So the real groin wound is the one that you would, I guess, be most concerned about. And that what they will do with that is pack that cavity, and then they'll put the junctional tourniquet on. But we've had a lot of people, the Army School of Health here and a lot of other elements within defence here that have bought these that aren't using junctional tourniquets, but they're still using it as a wound packing option. So, you know, he can be used either way. This extra one down here is just another place that you can have someone packing at the same time. Anatomically, it's probably not going to have a big arterial squirt there, but on him he does, because people just wanted a training aid that they could have a couple of people around to practice on at the same time. So yeah, he makes a lot of mess. You really do need to set up a nice big area around him, but yeah, he can get a few people working on him at once. Just to the right here, I'll just show you on this fellow here. This is the one that was put together initially for the Queensland Police, but we now sell those, a lot of those everywhere. He has 3 wounds. Again, they have the tubing comes in up in underneath the wound. So he has a small gunshot entry wound to his chest. He's got a stab wound here under his diaphragm, and he's got a junctional wound down here that needs packing. So they were the things that they were specifically wanting to train in. So he was put together for that purpose. And then the other guy there is just an option that is like a half chest for just really chest wound training. So he's slightly different. He has a couple of tubes that run in there to provide air as well as blood. So if you wanted to have like the sucking chest wound with a bubbling wound, that's what he's all about. All right, so we've pretty much gone through what that range is. The other thing I haven't shown you here is how to clean this all up when you're finished. A lot of people that are now having to look at hemorrhage control training aids for the first time in their training are a little bit nervous about how they're going to make all that work indoors. But it's not that difficult. I've got just a bucket of water here, but you can run them under the tap. You can do anything. They're very robust. I tend to, if I'm going to be training for a few days in a row, save this blood so you're not wasting it. Yep. The food colouring's not too bad either. I haven't had, I've had no trouble getting it off clothing, and I've been soaked in it at times. I haven't got it into any fine fabrics like silks and so forth, but I've washed it out of carpet and I've washed it out of clothes, and it's not been too bad. I do try to minimalise how much mess we make, but it is pretty good. I did do one event where we were nervous because it was a bit of a pristine looking room we were in, and I just thought, I just didn't like the optics of having the blood sprayed, so we just ran that with water and just discussed that with the client that that's what we were doing, and they were fine with that. We did one job for the Air Force once where we were doing it outdoors on the grass, and they didn't want red food colouring on their grass, so they went with water too, but yeah, it's fine. So with this, you can either just run it under the tap, you can stick it in a bucket of water. If you leave the blood in the tubing, it does harden, but it will generally still come out. Like sometimes if I've had to leave the training room in a hurry because it's the end of the day and they're about to lock up, I've just thrown it all into the bag and brought it out and cleaned it, you know, a couple of days later, and it still does wash out. If you need to, if it starts to get thick, a bit of warm water will get it out. But just running a little bit of water through it is really all you need to do. I tend to keep the syringes because they're not being used for anything clinical. There's no reason that you can't just wash them out and use them again and again. And that's really all you've got to do with it. It's very, very easy. Before we get into any hands-on, because we'll get you guys to have as much play as you want, are there any questions that anyone has? Yes.
That can be applied rather than them doing it, because I find
Yep. Time is hard.
one day course you can't do
It's yep. We've got a few different options, I guess, around that. We make a lot of individual little flat wounds that you can put on. Trauma ones, nursing ones, all sorts. This is a different range that some people are going for. These are what we call TraumaWear. So these are made to be sort of worn under the clothes. So you can have someone set up with a ripped hole in their jeans or whatever, and they can sort of put these on underneath. They're really for that quick and easy sort of stuff. You can throw a bit of fake blood on the top and that sort of stuff to dress it up, but yeah, designed to just be really robust, used over and over again, and all of that. So yeah, you're welcome to have a look through any of that sort of stuff. And we also teach how to do moulage and that sort of stuff as well, if you're ever interested in that part. But I know you often don't get a lot of time in a first aid course. Any other questions?
With TraumaWear, the options that you have that you can
Make bleed? Yes. And I don't know if I've got any here. No, I don't. I can't show you one. I can show you one afterwards, but we have ones where we've embedded some thinner tubing inside it so that it sits underneath and comes out, and then that extends up. So you can have, if you've got a role player wearing it, they can have a syringe of stuff in their pocket that they just sort of push out and it runs out through it. Yeah, to get a little bit juicy. Any other questions? Oh, okay. Yeah, so anybody in WA or anyone that can get here, we're going to have some of this stuff just set up here for anyone that wants to come in and have a play. So if you want to do a session on your own with it, if you don't feel confident in front of the whole class or whatever, if you want to come and have a play, you're very welcome. Just flick an email to Belinda and we will set up a little time for you to come in and you can play with whatever you like. We also do hire the Tourniquet Trainers and the thighs and any of these ones you can hire. So we understand that not everybody teaches advanced level stuff all the time, so it might not be something that you want to commit to initially. So if you want to just hire for a while, you're very welcome to do that. We have a bunch of them sort of on standby for that. Anything else?
We did have another one come through just in regards to durability, please.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they're very, very tough. Silicone is a very strong product. It's not affected by heat. It's not affected by anything much. I left one on the bonnet of my car once and ran over it and it was fine, had some tyre marks, but it cleaned up. They will last a long, long time. The ones that we've been using with Army, we've had out in service for probably 7 or 8 years. We do service them every so often. We might change the tubing and occasionally the odd valve, but they are pretty robust. The only thing we find, if they're packed away wet, you might end up with problems such as mould, which we have had that problem with Army where we've put them away in a shipping container and come back a few weeks later and they're a bit stinky. Just clean them out. You can put water through the tubing, you can put alcohol through the tubing, disinfect anything you need. It's all silicone and PVC, so it cleans up very well, pretty robust. You can take their clothes off and wash them too. Anyone else out there? Well, guys, you're very welcome to contact us at any time with any questions. We're here all the time. So, yeah, shoot through any questions via email, text, anything like that. Contact info's on the website. So, any questions you have regarding any of it, just yeah, feel free to let us know. And we might say goodbye. See ya. Thanks.